This is my IBM PS2 Model 95. In a previous video, I talked about how I got it, and I tested it and cleaned it up. And I talked a bit about my plans to upgrade it and to see just how much performance I can wring out of this thing. And now I'm picking up where I left off. I got a few new parts from eBay that I'm going to put in, and we'll see what kind of improvement it makes. First on the agenda, I got a new CPU complex for it. The CPU complex being IBM's terminology for the daughter card with the CPU on it. The original complex had a 486 SX 25 megahertz in it, and you can see it right here. And the new one has a 50 megahertz 486 DX2. You can see that they both look pretty similar, and that's because they are. There's many types of these processor complexes, and this one is called the Type 2. Definitely not the best complex you can have, but not the worst either. Processor complexes of any type are kind of rare and hard to come by on eBay, and they tend to fetch a pretty good amount when they do pop up. So I only paid $40 for this one, so I think that was a pretty good deal. I also got this 3Com Etherlink 3 Ethernet card, and this won't improve the gaming performance or anything. It's more of a quality of life upgrade. It's a lot easier to zip files around over a network than with floppy disks or a CD-ROM. And they're not exactly the hardest thing to come by, but I wouldn't say that they're plentiful either, because IBM kind of went all in on token ring back in the day, and Ethernet cards were rare, even when it was new. Oh, and I also picked up this Model M13 keyboard, because every vintage IBM should have a buckling screen keyboard. Anyway, let's install the new complex. It's kind of hard to put it in, it's a bit of a tight fit. And let's put in the Etherlink. And I also took out the cards I knew I wasn't going to need. There was some specialized hardware in there that I just had no use for, so I removed it. And done. Let's boot it up and pop in a reference disk. And you get a whole lot of errors. And I expected this. It's pretty normal when you install new hardware in a PS2 to have to run the reference disk and reconfigure everything, although I've never seen those errors before. But then this is my first time installing a new complex too. So boot off the reference disk. Processor card changed. So when it detects that there's been a BIOS error, usually when you boot off the reference disk, it'll tell you the error and give you the option to run automatic configuration, which is what I'm doing now. So now I get an IML error. It's telling me to restore the system partition, so that's what I'm going to do. So IML stands for Initial Microcode Load. It's kind of a quirky PS2 feature that only some models have, where the BIOS, instead of being stored on a ROM chip, is actually stored on the hard drive on a hidden partition called the system partition. And evidently changing the complex requires you to update that system partition. And to do this, you need both the reference disk and what's called the diagnostic disk. And these are also available from the Ardent Tool of Capitalism. I put the link up on the screen there where you can go to download the disk images. Okay, one beep. This is good. Insert the diagnostic diskette. Okay. Done. Restoration system partition is complete. Enter. Put the reference disk back in. Boom. And after the process completed and I rebooted the computer, it successfully boots into DOS. And here I'm running the check CPU application, and we can see that it successfully identifies the CPU as a 50 MHz 46 DX2. And system information also correctly identifies the CPU. So this upgrade was a success. So let's move on to configuring the Ethernet card. So in case you're not familiar with these old PS2s, most of them contain a bus called the microchannel architecture. And one of its big features was the ability to configure your devices and software. With the old ISA bus, you usually had to set a jumper on the card itself to configure things like the I/O address, or the IRQ, or the DMA. And it was pretty common that people didn't know which IRQ or I/O address or DMA they were already using. And it was very common for people to have conflicts and for it to cause problems with the computer. But with the PS2, usually when you got a new microchannel card, they would give you a disk with what's called an adapter definition file on it. And this file contains all the possible I/O addresses, DMA channels, and IRQs that the adapter could possibly use. And the reference disk could read that file and configure the device for you. And what you would do is you would boot off your reference disk and you would choose the option to copy an option disk, which is what I was doing. And the reference disk will copy the ADF file to the reference disk. And then you would reboot again to the reference disk, except now the reference disk has the information it needs to configure the card. And the reference disk can assign it the resources it needs without any conflicts. Effectively, it's kind of like a crude version of plug and play. And although it was ahead of its time, many people found it hard to use. And it just wasn't quite polished enough yet. I'll have to do like a deep dive video into it sometime. And now after we've rebooted, the computer recognizes the 3-COM adapter. And if you view the current configuration, you can see it in slot 6 and you can see what resources it got assigned. But just because the computer's BIOS recognizes it doesn't mean you can use it right away. See, DOS has no native networking support. So you need something called a packet driver, which is a driver provided by the manufacturer, which allows programs to use their card. And again, I found these on Ardent Tool, but what driver you need is going to depend on the make and model of the network card, and also the operating system you're running. So if you were running Windows, you would choose the Windows drivers. For me, I'm sticking to DOS, and I'm going to be using it with a program called MTCP, which is a suite of common networking tools for use with DOS. And I'm not going to go through the whole setup of it, because that would be a video in and of itself. But if you want to learn how to install and use it, there's a great video on Phil's Computer Lab, which I'll link to. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to my autoexec.bat. I have a feeling I might want to change that I/O address one day if I ever put a Sound Blaster compatible sound card in there. And here I'm just putting the packet driver into my autoexec.bat. So when I start the computer, it'll run the packet driver and have it running in the background. And I don't have to do it myself. And I'll also install MTCP, and again I'll put a link in the description of a good video that shows you how to set it up, and once that's done I can start using it. So what I did was, I have this old 10100 switch lying around, and I'm going to repurpose it to make just a network between this PC and my main PC, and that way it'll be physically isolated from the internet. Because as an IT guy, I firmly recommend against connecting old computers to the internet. And yeah, I guess I didn't record any footage of actually using MTCP, but now I'm able to run an FTP server, and I can, download or upload files between the two using MTCP, which is pretty cool. Anyway, let's do some benchmarks and then we'll end it here. First up is 3D Bench. If you remember last time we tested before the upgrades, I got a score of 16.4 FPS. And now with the new CPU complex, I'm getting a decent improvement to 23.6 FPS. Next up is the PC Player benchmark. Before the upgrades, I was getting 4.2 FPS. With the new complex installed, I'm up to 7.4 FPS. In the landmark system speed test before, I was getting 118.6 megahertz. Interestingly, this time I couldn't even get it to run. I'm not sure what's up with that. For system information, I seem to have lost the footage, so I honestly don't remember what it got. So instead, here's a new benchmark. This is Chris's 3D benchmark. And here I get a score of 29.1, which is 17.4 frames per second. And last up is Doom's Time Demo 3. Before the upgrades, I got 6,237 real ticks. And when you do the math, that comes out to 11.9 FPS. And now with the new CPU complex, I've got 4,720 real ticks, which works out to 15.8 FPS. So all in all, we got a pretty modest but still significant performance improvement from upgrading from the 486 SX 25 MHz complex up to the 486 DX2 50 MHz complex. Which sounds about right to me. After all, we did double the clock speed, but we're still running on a 25 MHz front side bus, and a lot of these benchmarks are going to be dependent on the video card and the speed of the system bus. So I wouldn't expect doubling in performance just by doubling the clock speed. And I'll grant you the numbers don't sound all that impressive in and of themselves, but if you look at it in context and you look at the percentage improvement from one complex to the other, it actually did pretty well. We're missing some results, of course, but you can see we're in the range of 30 to 40% improvement. And PC Player in particular is a very impressive 76% gain. So I'm actually pretty impressed. I'll take that. And I think there's still a lot of performance to be had that's left on the table. If we can get a 486 complex with a 33 megahertz system bus, or even better, Pentium complex, I think this system will do pretty well. Considering it was made in 1992, which was before Doom even came out. And back in the day, this is the kind of experience I remember when playing it for the first time. For all my talk of making the best PS2 ever, you're never going to make it run Crysis. You have to keep things in perspective and set reasonable expectations. But yeah, I just love these old PS2 series of computers, and I just really like the idea of maxing out what the architecture can do. But that's all for now. We're not done with upgrading this thing, but until we do, I'll see you next time.